Well, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to this continuing set of teachings on the Mahamudra Prayer. And today's verse is about wisdom. Today we're on verse 5, and this is the second main section in the body of the prayer. It's a prayer, so it's an aspiration for wisdom, and the word for wisdom here is pranja, or prajna, or prajna. It seems to have several possible pronunciations. Anyway, it's the general word for wisdom, as opposed to jhana, looks like jnana, jhana, which is uniquely primordial wisdom that is only there when the mind is connected or is Buddha mind. So that's a very, very advanced state. All other types of wisdom are covered by this word pranja, which goes from the basic worldly wisdom through to sort of spiritual wisdom. It's called supramundane wisdom, and then the very best supramundane wisdom. We find that in other texts, but here we're looking at Mahamudra and the wisdom that we'll need in order to practice, and we're praying in our future lives and in this life to find that wisdom and nurture it. So let me read you the verse straight away. Studying the scriptures and correct reason, the cloud of ignorance is lifted. Contemplating the essential instructions, the darkness of doubt is conquered, and in the light born of meditation, the natural state shines clearly just as it is. May the brilliance of these three wisdoms ever increase. So here we have wisdom as a three-step process, not as three separate areas of wisdom, but as a basis that you absolutely need, from which emerges the second level of wisdom, and then that becomes the third. So a three-step process, and we need to give them names, and in the structure of the text, then we have four parts. Number one is pranja as study. Second part is pranja as deep reflection. Third part is pranja as, we'll see, usually the word is translated as meditation, that arises from meditation. We could also say that arises from familiarity, which is the real meaning of the word. And then a summary of these 1, 2, 3 together makes number 4. So when we go through a commentary, we consider each step and then all of them together. Study, deep reflection, and meditation. Generally, when we study Tibetan Buddhism, then these are everywhere. This verse is often quoted. Those three steps of wisdom are absolutely primordial. We need them. But then those same three steps, and please remember them. Say them with me now. Study, deep reflection, meditation. Study, deep reflection, meditation. We need to really, really understand that. However, we're practicing Dharma. But we'll see that there is a special level of their understanding when it comes to Mahamudra practice. The first one is study. And this doesn't mean scholastic study. It means what we can acquire from the outside. And in fact, the original word translated into Tibetan meant hearing, because in the first centuries of Dharma, there was no writing. There were no books. There wasn't scholastic study in that sense. one heard. Thus have I heard. Something was passed on from one person to another, very accurately, very purely, until they memorized it. And then when you'd heard properly and received properly, you could pass it on to others, saying, thus have I heard. And so the factual message, the scriptural message, became transmitted in an oral tradition. It was only 3, 4, 5 centuries after Buddha that scholasticism and organized study and writing and then the Buddhist universities became very big. Some might say they became too big. Buddhism became too much a head thing rather than a meditation thing anyway. That's for historians, scholars, analysts. Now the point here, this is what study means. It means we must get the information accurately, purely, and understand it properly. We have to get the facts straight. We must understand what the Buddha's teachings are telling us. For that, we need to go to scriptures. Usually, they've always been the source of our understanding. The general Buddhist scriptures, the Mahayana scriptures, and then these need to be explained to us by a qualified teacher with real understanding. So I won't comment on that much, but these days there are so many wonderful speakers, glib teachers. They've got street language, they can put things in sort of everyday terms, they can be quite attractive. The question is, are they really transmitting the Buddha's message that works for everyone? Or are they translating how it worked for them and thus reducing it to one bit of the original and then passing that on in a not so pure language? So anyway, with the prajna, the wisdom of study, we must get the facts straight. And we must get enough information so that the picture is clear. Not a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but enough so we do have a basic, well-structured understanding of what the Buddha is teaching us in the basic teachings about suffering and getting free from it, and in the Bodhisattva teachings about the journey to enlightenment. So that's the first level. Very, very, very important. But then it's knowledge. It's the sort of thing you could go to a Buddhist college, or these days maybe even any university with a Buddhist curriculum, and you can study it, and you can have the words and the information and the structures in place. You could become very clever at that. But is this what it's about? No. So the second step, which is called deep reflection, doesn't come from the outside. It's not acquired. It comes from inside. And it can only come through our own work, through our own long and sincere reflection, turning the topic around again and again to think, what is this really saying? Observing life and seeing, is it true or not? Observing our own minds in meditation and seeing not only is it true or not, but how very, very, very true it is. And often in that stage, then we have a conflict because what people call their ego or their habits doesn't want to hear the message of Dharma. It doesn't want to hear about desire and involvement and the cost of it in terms of suffering because what we cling to changes. All these kind of messages. So for much of the Buddha's message, there will be a resistance, and this gives rise often to doubt, confusion. So for the first one, study, this verse is saying quite simply that we need to study the scriptures and correct reasoning. It doesn't mean you need to go and do, as Tibetans do sometimes, 6 years, even 9 years, studying all the ideas of Dharma, and in particular a lot of philosophy about the various Buddhist schools and Middle Way and Shentong and Ramtong and all of that. It means we need to make sure that what we are learning about Dharma is really what the Buddha and Shantideva and Nagarjuna and the Sangha, the great beings of Mahayana, and in our lineage, Tilopa, Naropa, and so on, what they were really saying. So once we've got the words and the ideas clear as the authentic message of the lineage, then it says clear reasoning. So we don't just believe the scriptures. We need to understand the intelligence behind it. And there again, you don't necessarily need to go and learn Buddhist debate. I'm sure you've seen them with all their spars. It's a wonderful thing, but it doesn't mean that without that you cannot think clearly. Of course not. Of course not. So it means we need to bring our intelligence and need to have some idea of reason and logic. We need to be reasonable. We need to be reasonable about our thinking and to see the reason in it, the logic in it. So that's the study part. Receiving pure teachings, understanding their value intellectually. And the second part, deep reflection, is then letting that mature inside. Akon Rinpoche often used to say it's like an old person sucking slowly on a sweet. They want to get every drop of juice out of it, their money's worth. Not like a kid, like I was. My sister worked in a boiled sweet factory. We had sweets all week, where I'd just crunch one and eat another one and crunch it. We don't do that. We don't go round and round getting more and more Buddhist information, watching more and more lectures online, reading more and more books, and it just comes in and goes very superficially. As Akon Rinpoche used to say, maybe one sentence is all you'll need for your life. He was making a point, but rather than endless conceptual information, we need, through deep reflection, to bring the teachings to life in ourselves. There are various ways of doing this, such as something called Dungom, where you take one sentence and you sit with it, you repeat it slowly, you think about it, you think about life, you repeat it again, and you do that quite nicely until some new light from the teachings comes into you. As the years go by, and as we experience life, and we take the time to consider the Buddha's teaching, then this second stage of deep reflection should mean that the teaching is no longer a field of study out there, what the Buddha says. We've taken it into us, and it becomes the way we're thinking. Now, in fact, in one way of explaining these 3 steps of study, then taking that second deep reflection to its end means that in the end your mind is Dharma. You couldn't see things any other way. Of course everything is devoid of own reality. Everything is interconnected and changing. And of course we don't have a fixed self or ego. And of course there's karma. It couldn't be any other way. So the third stage, which is the word gom in Tibetan, means total familiarity, total assimilation through profound reflection. And it's understood that the meditation we're doing at the same time that we're learning wisdom, wisdom, meditation, right conduct are the three main thrusts of the Buddha's teaching. So the meditation we're doing, cultivating shamatha, a perfectly still mind, cultivating vipassana, insight, lakton, where we examine that mind. The meditation is actually bringing to life so beautifully that familiarity with the Buddha's teaching. So its third one is compared to a light, the light born of meditation. But really, that light is seen as coming to our study, to our understanding. And this is often summed up as the view. It is the way now you are seeing life, the way now you are seeing yourself. So that's something about the 3 steps of wisdom. The first one, we need to study the scriptures. We need to learn to think clearly, logically, with reason. The second one, deep reflection. It says, when there's doubt, then what do we need to do? Because there will be doubt. We think, how can that be? Or there's a resistance inside. Then is the time you go to your Mahamudra teacher, or to any good Buddhist teacher. And they give you what is called minak in Tibetan, direct instruction. We have a whole lineage of profound direct instruction about how to help us resolve our doubts and problems. So one goes to a teacher and they can usually put their finger on something or give you a way to think, something to take away, some help, some catalyst, so that you can break through your doubts and your resistance. So it says that the teacher's advice cuts away, hacks away that darkness of doubt, because doubt holds us back. Doubt holds us back. And we need to solve the doubt. But the problem with the human mind is we're not just on a straight upward journey. We solve the doubts, it's all sorted, but then 2 years later, the same thing can come back. And sometimes it can give us months or years of detour from our Dharma path. So once we have sorted the doubt, we need to have clarity and certainty. And remembering our good Dharma teacher's advice at that time is very, very helpful. So now when we come to Mahamudra, then the study doesn't mean you need too vast a Buddhist study. But then again, you certainly need a bare minimum. And very fortunately, in the early days of my Dharma life in Samiling, then we had the very great master, Kalu Rinpoche, the first Kalu Rinpoche, who was the teacher of meditation for all the heart sons of the 16th Karmapa. And he was asked by Akon Rinpoche, as well as Khenchen Trangul Rinpoche and the Karmapa, what is absolutely necessary for Westerners to study if they want to follow this Mahamudra path. And Kalu Rinpoche said, actually, traditionally, there are 3 texts famous in our Kagyu tradition that are must-know texts. You can't really progress without them. Some people say, but Milarepa never studied. Well, it's not true. The great teachers I've had completely dismiss this myth. And if ever a Lama tells you Milarepa studied, well, I won't tell you punch him on the nose, but don't take any notice. Milarepa, after he was accepted by Mapa, spent 7 years with him, and Mapa had been 20 years with Naropa, India's finest scholar. Do you think that Mapa didn't pass on the nectar, the essence of his understanding to Milarepa? And he just treated him like a Dumbo? No way. And when you see Milarepa's responses to the scholars who came to him, he was on top of a lot of stuff. So even if you do want to spend the rest of your life in a cave or in a retreat, you only want to meditate, what Kalu Rinpoche said is you absolutely must need to know, to have assimilated all of, and to have deeply reflected on Gampopa's text, the ornament of precious liberation, all of that. It is beautifully distilled overview of all the Buddha's teaching. It's really everything you need to know is there, but you need to master that, not just to have read it, to have assimilated it. That gives us the basic understanding. Then the next text is the Mahayana Uttara Tantra Shastra, the Buddha nature teachings from Asanga. And there are many translations of those. Some 17 years of my life were devoted to making one of them. It's published as Maitreya on Buddha nature, with brief commentaries based on Trungpa Rinpoche, Khenpo Sotim Jamso, and Taisa Dupa's teachings on Buddha nature. So we must know that too, because it's about the nature of our mind, and Mahamudra gives us the actual practice so that we recognize that nature that we've read about and studied. So our study needs to be at least those two, and then when you have done lots of meditation and channel and chakra work and deep mind work, Mahamudra pointing out, then you may need a third text which is called Profound Inner Principles or Profound Inner Meaning, about the energies at work in the universe and in your mind-body continuum. So there are Mahamudra study necessities. We need to assimilate them and reflect deeply, deeply, deeply until they become part of us. But then it is the teachings, such as in this text, given by a master, all the many stages of shamatha, and then the many exercises of vipassana, insight, and then the pointing out and what comes along with that, the introduction to the nature of mind. Then those teachings, those meditation practices, not the teachings, the practice that you've done over years and years, will shine such a wonderful immediate light, so you're no longer in a world of words and ideas as your Dharma. You have each moment such a fresh, such a wonderful experience of life. It is teaching you afresh every moment and bringing the Buddha's teaching to life again and again and again. And the nature of your mind, which is the nature of everything, will be seen so clearly, so brightly. You will be light and relatively enlightened. So it talks about the wisdom that comes through meditation is like a light, where everything is just brilliant, showing you itself as it really is. Okay, this is a brief summary. This verse could take 2, 3, 4, 5 talks, but maybe this is enough for now. Study well, reflect deeply, meditate well. You'll never regret. You'll bring yourself benefits for many, many lives to come.